They mocked my dead mom at our rehearsal dinner. So I ended everything. My fiancée and her parents publicly made fun of my late mother at our rehearsal dinner, so without even hesitating, I called off the wedding right then and there in front of everyone. I'm 34 now, and up until recently I was engaged to Chloe, a woman I truly believed I'd grow old with. We met about 7 years ago at a backyard cookout through some mutual friends. She had this incredible smile and a quick sense of humor, and we just instantly hit it off. When I proposed a year ago, it wasn't even a question in my mind, it just felt right. The timing, the person, everything seemed to line up. Back then, it wasn't just Chloe I was committing to, I was also, in a way, joining her family. Her parents, Frank and Susan, were the kind of folks who had to be the center of attention no matter the occasion. They were loud, always had something to say, and weren't shy about offering their opinions on anything and everything. At first, I chalked it up to just being their personality. But the longer I spent around them, the more I noticed how deeply entitled they were. And that attitude seemed to seep into every part of their lives. But before I get into everything that happened, I need to tell you a little about my mom. Her name was Diane, and without a doubt, she was the best human being I've ever known. She passed away a year ago after a brutal 2-year battle with cancer. Watching her go through that fight and still put others first was nothing short of humbling. She taught me what it means to be kind, to be generous, and to stand your ground when it matters. She wasn't just a rock for me, she was a lifeline for so many others. She had this quiet way of helping people without ever making them feel small or like they owed her anything. She'd just step in and do what needed to be done. That included Chloe's family, too. Frank and Susan owe her more than they'll ever admit, but you sure wouldn't know it from how they talk about her these days. When I first introduced Chloe to my mom, things seemed okay. My mom told me she liked Chloe and Chloe was polite enough. But as things started getting more serious between us, it became clear that there was tension. Nothing big or explosive, just little digs here and there. Chloe would say things like my mom was too involved or a bit too eager to help. That stuff rubbed me the wrong way, but I told myself it was probably just Chloe trying to find her footing with a new family. The thing is, my mom went out of her way to support Chloe's family. Years ago, when their restaurant was barely staying afloat, my mom co-signed a loan to keep them going. Nobody else was willing to take the kind of risk, but she believed in them. She even helped them get their finances in order and worked with them on a plan to turn the business around, and it actually worked. Thanks to her, the restaurant stayed open, and Frank and Susan kept their livelihood. And it didn't stop there. When their industrial oven broke and they couldn't afford a replacement, my mom stepped in and bought a new one with her own money. She didn't ask for anything back, even though later on she could have really used that cash for her own medical treatment. That's just the kind of person she was. And then there was Chloe's older brother, Derek. He was about to drop out of college because he couldn't afford tuition for his last semester. So my mom covered it. She paid for him to finish school because she believed that an education was something no one could take from you. But it wasn't just money she gave her time, her energy, her heart. She spent hours helping Chloe's family, everything from bookkeeping to babysitting Derek's kids so he could study. And you know what? Not once did any of them, Frank, Susan, or Derek, ever truly thank her. Sure, they said thanks here and there, but there was never any real appreciation for what she'd done. That never bothered my mom, though. She didn't do it for the praise. She helped people because that's who she was. When she died, I was shattered. She meant the world to me, and losing her felt like I'd lost a part of myself. Chloe was there with me during the worst of it, or at least I thought she was. Looking back now, I realize most of her support was surface level. She'd throw out comments like, "You need to move on," or "Your mom wouldn't want you to stay stuck in this." And maybe that was technically true, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt like she was brushing my grief aside. As the wedding day got closer, more red flags started to pop up. Chloe would act kind of cold whenever I mentioned my mom while we were planning the ceremony. For instance, I brought up the idea of including a small tribute to my mom during the vows, and Chloe just dismissed it, saying something like, "Wouldn't that make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be joyful." I let it go because I didn't want to argue. But little things like that just kept adding up. And then there were the comments from Frank and Susan. They had this condescending way of talking to me like they genuinely believed Chloe was marrying below her standards. I remember Frank cracking a joke once, saying Chloe was leveling up by marrying someone from a more humble background. And Susan? She'd throw out lines like, "Well, we all make sacrifices for love," as if Chloe agreeing to be with me was some kind of noble act on her part. It hurt, no lie. But I bit my tongue for Chloe's sake. Now, looking back, I really wish I had spoken up sooner. Maybe I could have spared myself a whole lot of heartache. But I kept telling myself that once we were married and the chaos settled down, things would smooth out. Man, I couldn't have been more wrong. So jump ahead to about a month before the wedding. That's when things really started falling apart. Like I mentioned earlier, Chloe's folks, Frank and Susan, offered to host the rehearsal dinner at this upscale restaurant they had connections with. At first, I thought it was a generous gesture. I figured maybe they were trying to make amends for all the passive-aggressive comments and awkward vibes they'd been throwing around during the whole wedding planning process. Honestly, I told myself maybe this is them stepping up and showing a little class. But here's some context. They didn't just offer to host, they made a whole production out of it. Susan couldn't stop bringing it up in every conversation, saying things like, "Oh, we've gone all out to make this rehearsal dinner unforgettable. It'll be the talk of the town." And Frank? He jumped in any chance he got, bragging about how the restaurant was one of the best around and how lucky we all were that they managed to book it. The whole thing started to feel more like a chance for them to show off than a gift for us. Still, I was focused on getting through the wedding, so I let them run with it. Huge mistake. As we got closer to the dinner, their real selves started to shine through even more. Every conversation became laced with backhanded compliments or little jabs. Like, when I asked to confirm the guest list, Susan just rolled her eyes and said, "We've got it, Ethan. No need for you to stress, just show up and enjoy." That might sound like a small thing, but it bothered me. I mean, wasn't this our event? Shouldn't Chloe and I have a say in who was invited? Then came the food. Susan went on and on about how they were curating a fine dining experience for the evening. She said things like, "We've arranged for the chef to prepare something truly special, nothing like what you'd get back home, Ethan." That "back home" line? That was her favorite dig. She loved throwing in those little reminders that I didn't come from the same social circle as they did. See, I grew up in a small, working-class town and they never let me forget it. I tried to ignore it to keep my eyes on the bigger picture. I kept telling myself, just get through this one night. Smile, nod, and move on. But even Chloe started acting different. She'd always had this habit of siding with her parents, but in the weeks before the dinner, it got worse. Anytime I brought up a concern or idea, she'd just brush me off with, "Ethan, you're overthinking it. My parents know what they're doing." Thing is, it wasn't just about that one dinner. It was the way they all made me feel like an outsider in my own relationship. They treated me like I should be grateful just to be in Chloe's life, like I was lucky to even be at the table. And Chloe? She never once stood up for me. If anything, she made it worse by laughing along with them or shutting me down whenever I tried to voice how I felt. About a week before the dinner, something happened that really should have been my wake-up call. Chloe and I were at her parents' place going over some final wedding details. Susan was in full-on control mode, flipping through seating charts, making decisions about flower arrangements, acting like she was organizing a royal gala. At one point, I suggested we swap the centerpieces for something a bit simpler, something my mom would have loved. Susan didn't even look up. She just said, "Oh, Diane had interesting taste, didn't she? But this is Chloe's day. Let's keep it modern, shall we?" I froze. It was subtle, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. And Chloe? She didn't say a word. Just sat there scrolling through her phone like she didn't hear it. I wanted to call Susan out right then and there, but I didn't want to turn it into a scene. So I swallowed it. Again. Looking back, I hate that I didn't speak up. It's like every little insult and snide comment was piling up, but I just kept letting it go because I didn't want to cause drama. I honestly thought I was just trying to keep the peace. Then the day of the rehearsal dinner rolled around, and right away I could feel the tension hanging in the air. Chloe and I rode to the restaurant together, and I tried making small talk to ease the mood. She barely looked up from her phone, just kept scrolling, and gave me short, one-word replies. When I asked if she was excited about the night, she gave a half shrug and mumbled, "It's just a dinner, Ethan. Don't overthink it." Just a dinner, huh? When we got to the restaurant, Frank and Susan were already there and acting like they owned the damn place. Frank was parked by the entrance, shaking hands with guests like some kind of politician, while Susan was off bossing the staff around, giving orders like she ran the joint. The whole vibe felt more like a corporate function than something meant to celebrate family. The place itself was ridiculously upscale, white linen tablecloths, chandeliers overhead, everything designed to scream, "Look how classy we are." And honestly, I felt completely out of place the moment I walked in. As more people started showing up, something didn't sit right with me. Most of the faces were from Chloe's side of the family. On my side, there were maybe 5 of us, my dad, my sister, and a couple close friends and relatives. Everyone else? Either one of Chloe's relatives or someone connected to her parents' business world. It felt less like a rehearsal dinner and more like a networking mixer for Frank and Susan. So I pulled Chloe aside and asked, why are there so few people from my family here? She rolled her eyes and gave me this annoyed look like I was being difficult. Then she said, Ethan, your family's small. My parents had to fill the room somehow. It's not a big deal. That was her go-to phrase for everything, not a big deal. I kept quiet and went back to mingling, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole night wasn't about us. It was about Frank and Susan putting on a show. They'd completely taken over what should have been a special moment for Chloe and me and turned it into their own little spotlight. And once dinner wrapped up, that's when the real show began, the speeches. Naturally, Frank was the first one to grab the mic. He strutted up there like he was about to deliver a TED Talk, not a toast at his daughter's wedding rehearsal. He cleared his throat and said, welcome everyone. Tonight is about celebrating the union of two families, our Chloe and, of course, Ethan. And the way he said my name? Like it physically hurt him to get it out. I sat there, trying to keep a straight face, but every sentence out of his mouth felt like a jab. He went on and on about how proud he was of Chloe, how she'd always been the shining star of the family. She's always known what she wanted, he said, and she goes after it. Now she's marrying someone who'll help keep her grounded. He threw in this little smirk, and I swear a few folks actually laughed. I just stared at him, trying to figure out if I'd heard that right. Then he launched into some story about how Chloe had always been a high achiever as a kid and how it was thanks to their guidance that she stayed on track. At one point, he literally said, we've always taught Chloe to aim high. And while Ethan might not be what we originally envisioned, then he just let the sentence dangle like it was supposed to be some kind of punchline. I could feel my dad and sister shooting daggers at him from across the table. Then Susan took the mic. She strutted up there like she was accepting an Oscar. Her speech started out harmless. She said some nice things about how much she loved Chloe and how thrilled she was about the wedding. But then the jabs started creeping in. She talked about Chloe being the perfect daughter who deserved the very best in life, and then said, thankfully she's so patient, she's already taught Ethan so much. I nearly spit out my drink. Taught me? What? How to stay silent while her parents took shots at me every chance they got. Then she looked right at me and said, we're just thrilled to welcome you into the family, Ethan. It'll be great having someone around who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, right? She laughed, and a few of her relatives chuckled right along with her. I turned to look at Chloe, hoping she'd finally speak up or at least show some discomfort. But no. She was grinning and laughing along with the rest of them. Just when I thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, Frank stepped back up to the mic. He tapped his glass a few times and said, one last thing before we wrap it up tonight. I want to take a moment to recognize someone who's no longer with us, but who had a huge impact on the man Ethan is today, his mother, Diane. For a split second, I actually thought he might say something respectful. But no, of course not. Instead, he goes, Diane was truly one of a kind. Then he followed it up with, she sure had a way of inserting herself into everything, didn't she? Always had a strong opinion on how things should be done. He chuckled at his own comment. And then Susan jumped in, oh, absolutely. She definitely had strong opinions. Remember how she always insisted on helping, even when nobody asked her to? I sat there in disbelief. I couldn't believe they were talking about my mom like she was some nosy neighbor from down the street. But Frank wasn't finished. He added, but all jokes aside, Diane really was a generous woman. Then he smirked and said, she helped us out a lot. Maybe a little too much, if I'm being totally honest. He winked like he just shared some inside joke, and the entire room went quiet, but Frank kept right on going. We'll make sure to carry her spirit into the wedding, he said. Let's just hope Ethan doesn't pick up her habit of taking charge. We wouldn't want him meddling too much, right? And that was the last straw. My face burned with anger, and my hands were clenched into fists under the table. I looked over at Chloe, silently pleading for her to say something, to put an end to this. But instead, she just laughed and said, oh, Dad, stop. Like they were just teasing and it was all harmless fun. Harmless fun? They were making a joke out of my mother's memory in front of a room full of people, and Chloe thought it was funny? Couldn't wrap my head around it. What made it worse was that Frank and Susan seemed to think they were being cute. They wore these smug, satisfied smiles, like they believed everyone in the room was laughing along with them. But when I glanced around, I could tell that wasn't true at all. When Frank finally sat back down, the tension in the room was so thick it felt like you could slice through it with a steak knife. People awkwardly started clinking their glasses and poking at their food again, clearly trying to pretend that disaster of a speech hadn't just happened. Chloe leaned in and asked, "Are you okay?" Like she was offering me a refill on my drink, not checking if I was about to explode. I didn't even look at her. I just gave her a tight nod. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. And then Susan walked up to our table. "Ethan," she said sweetly, "I really hope you weren't offended." She gave me a rehearsed smile and added, "Frank and I just wanted to lighten the mood a little. It was all in good fun." And that was it. That was the moment something inside me broke. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood up, and my chair screeched across the floor behind me. "Are you actually serious right now?" I said, my voice low, but shaking with fury. There I was, standing right in the middle of the rehearsal dinner, the back legs of my chair still slightly tilted from when I stood up. You could have heard a pin drop. It was like the whole room hit mute. Every single person had their eyes on me, but I didn't care. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck, and my face felt like it was on fire, but I knew I couldn't just sit there and let it slide. Frank and Susan had already crossed the line with their jokes about my mom. But Susan's fake little apology? That was the final blow. "Are you serious right now?" I said again, staring Susan down. She froze for a second, clearly not expecting me to call her out in front of everyone. Frank looked up from his drink like I'd just insulted him somehow. Chloe leaned over and whispered, "Ethan, stop." But I didn't even flinch. "Let me get this straight," I said, louder this time. "You've been taking cheap shots at my mom all night. The same woman who bent over backwards to help your family when nobody else would. And now you want to play it off like it was just a harmless joke? You think that's okay?" Frank leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said with a smug smirk, "Relax, Ethan. You're overreacting. It was just good fun." "Good fun?" I snapped. "You called her meddling. You said she was too much. You made fun of her generosity like it was something to be embarrassed about. How the hell is that good fun?" The air in the room felt heavy. You could practically feel the discomfort rolling off the guests. I saw a few of Chloe's cousins staring down at their plates, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. My dad, though, he was locked in on Frank, looking like he was ready to punch a hole through the table. And my sister, she had her arms crossed and was shooting daggers at Susan, like she was just waiting for her chance to jump in. Susan let out a little laugh, like she was trying to brush it all off. "Oh, Ethan, don't take it so seriously. We were just reminiscing, sharing some stories." Then she added, "Everyone knows Diane liked to take control." I stared at her, stunned. "Take control," I repeated, my voice climbing in volume. "She helped you," I snapped. "She kept your business afloat when it was about to go under. She paid to fix your oven, covered the cost of your patio remodel, and even helped pay for your son's college tuition. And this is how you repay her," I said, staring at both of them. "By turning her into a punchline at a rehearsal dinner?" Frank sat up a little straighter in his chair, clearly irritated now. "All right, that's enough," he said, trying to sound like he was laying down the law. "We didn't mean any harm," he continued, "but if you're gonna throw a fit over it, maybe you're not mature enough to get married." That right there told me everything I needed to know, how little he respected me, or my mom, for that matter. Chloe finally stepped in. She gently tugged on my sleeve and said, "Ethan, can we please just go outside and talk?" I pulled my arm away. "No, Chloe. We're not going anywhere. Not until your parents realize just how out of line they've been." Susan let out this exaggerated sigh, acting like she was the one being attacked. "Ethan, this is supposed to be a joyful night. You're ruining it for everyone." "I'm ruining it?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "No, Susan. You ruined it the second you decided to stand up and trash my mom in front of everyone. And you, Chloe," I added, turning to her, "you sat there and didn't say a word." Chloe's face flushed. "I didn't know they were going to say all that," she said, trying to defend herself. "But you laughed," I fired back. "You laughed at every single dig. You didn't try to stop them. You didn't even look uncomfortable." By now, the buzz of whispered conversations was spreading around the room. People were leaning in, talking behind their hands, watching this mess unfold like a live drama. I could feel all their eyes on me, but I didn't care. This wasn't about them. This was about standing up for my mother. That's when Frank stood up, looking like he was done with the whole thing. "All right, Ethan," he said sharply, pointing toward the exit. "If you're that offended, maybe you should just leave." And for a moment, I almost did. I thought about walking out, letting them enjoy the rest of their perfect little evening without me. But then I looked around. I saw my dad. I saw my sister. I saw a few close friends who had shown up just to support me. They were all watching, waiting to see what I'd do. And right then I made up my mind. No, I said firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Not until you understand exactly what you've done. Frank opened his mouth like he had something else to say, but I cut him off. You talk about my mom like she was some pushy, overbearing nuisance, but if it weren't for her, you wouldn't even have this restaurant connection, I said, my voice steady now. She never did any of that for praise or recognition. She did it because she cared about people. Because she cared about you. And now you're turning her into a punchline like she meant nothing. That's not just rude. It's disgusting. The room fell into another heavy silence. Even Frank looked stunned, like he hadn't expected me to stand up for her like that. Susan opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Chloe just sat frozen, staring down at the table, her face a mix of shame and frustration. Finally, Frank muttered, "We didn't mean it like that." "It doesn't matter how you meant it," I said. "What matters is how it came across. You don't get to rewrite who my mom was just because it's more convenient for you. She deserved better than this. And honestly, so do I." With that, I stepped back from the table and grabbed my coat. "You want me to leave? Fine. But don't expect me to come back." My dad stood up immediately and walked toward me, no hesitation. My sister grabbed her purse and gave Susan one last ice-cold glare before following us out. A few of my friends rose from their seats too, unsure of what to do but clearly wanting to support me. Chloe called after me, "Ethan, wait." But I didn't even turn around. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, even though my chest felt like it was going to explode from the pressure. Outside, my dad gently put a hand on my shoulder and said, "You did the right thing." "You know," my dad said softly, "your mom would be proud of you." I gave him a small nod, but truthfully, I didn't feel proud. I felt furious and betrayed. And then it hit me. If Chloe couldn't find the courage to speak up for me or for my mom, then maybe she wasn't the woman I thought she was. Part of me believed I'd done the right thing by walking out, but there was this nagging feeling in my gut that it wasn't enough. Not yet. If I left it there, Chloe and her family would twist the story. They'd paint me as the overly sensitive guy who made a scene for no reason. No way. I wasn't going to let them rewrite what happened. Because this wasn't just about me. It was about my mother. It was about her legacy. And it was about standing up for what mattered to me. I let out a deep breath and turned to my dad. "I have to go back in there," I said. "What?" my sister blurted out. "Why? You don't owe them a damn thing." "I know," I said, locking eyes with her. "But I'm not walking away without setting the record straight. I need to make it clear to Chloe, to her parents, to everyone in that room that this is it. I'm done." My dad paused for a second, then gave me a nod. "If that's what you feel you need to do, we've got your back." I shook my head. "No. This one's on me. I need to do it alone." My sister looked like she wanted to argue, but she bit her tongue. I turned around and started walking back toward the restaurant. My stomach was twisting itself into knots, but my head had never felt clearer. I wasn't going back to stir up more drama. I was going back to end it for good. As I stepped inside, I noticed people glancing toward the entrance, whispering, their eyes following me like I was the elephant in the room no one wanted to acknowledge. Chloe was still at our table, pale and wide-eyed. When she spotted me, she stood up. "Ethan," she said quietly, "what are you doing?" I didn't answer her. I walked past her straight to the front of the room where Frank and Susan were still sitting, looking way too satisfied for people who had caused such a mess. Frank raised an eyebrow when he saw me coming, clearly surprised I'd returned. Susan greeted me with that same fake, sugary smile she'd worn all night. "Back already?" Frank said, his voice soaked in sarcasm. I didn't even look at him. Instead, I turned toward the crowd. "Excuse me, everyone," I said loud and clear. The chatter died instantly. Every eye turned to me. My heart was pounding, but I held my ground. "I have something I need to say." I glanced at Chloe, who was standing stiffly by the table, her hands clutched together like she didn't know what to do. "I know this isn't what anyone expected," I continued, "but after everything that's happened tonight, I don't see the point in waiting." I took a breath and let the words come. "This wedding is off." The room exploded, gasps, whispers, the screech of chairs being pushed back. People turned to each other in disbelief. Chloe's jaw dropped. Her hands shot up to her mouth. "Ethan, no," she whispered. I raised my hand to silence her. The room went dead quiet again. Even the waitstaff froze in place, like they weren't sure if they should keep serving. I looked back out at the crowd. "This isn't just about one bad night," I said. "It's about the kind of people I'd be marrying into. A family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mother, and doesn't share the values I was raised with." I can't and I won't spend the rest of my life being treated like that. Frank finally broke the silence. You're making a huge mistake, kid, he said with that same condescending tone he always used. You're throwing away a good thing over nothing. I let out a bitter laugh. Nothing? You think mocking my mom in front of a room full of people is nothing? You think treating me like I don't matter is nothing? No, Frank. The real mistake would be going through with this wedding and tying myself to a family that never deserved me in the first place. Susan looked like she might burst into tears, or maybe she was just mortified that their little show had completely backfired. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. Let's not make any rash decisions. We can talk this over tomorrow once everyone's had time to calm down. No, I said, calm but firm. There won't be a conversation tomorrow. Or ever. We're done. I turned to Chloe one final time. Her face was streaked with tears and she looked like she couldn't decide whether to scream or beg. Without another word, I walked toward the door. Every step echoed through the silent room like a drumbeat. As I reached for the handle, I heard her voice behind me, desperate and cracking. Ethan, please, don't do this. I paused at the door for just a second, my hand resting on the handle. Then I turned back and said I already did. Walking out of that restaurant felt like tearing off a band-aid. Yeah, it stung, but more than anything, it felt like a weight had been lifted. It was finally over. The wedding. The disrespect. That constant feeling like I was some kind of outsider in a family I was supposed to be marrying into. All of it behind me now. But the real fallout? That started the next morning. I woke up to my phone lit up with over 50 unread messages. Most of them were from Chloe. A few were from Frank and Susan. There were even some from random relatives of hers I barely remembered meeting. The messages ran the full emotional spectrum, some were desperate, others downright nasty. Chloe's texts were full of apologies. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just talk to me. Frank, of course, went the other route. You humiliated us in front of everyone. You'll regret this. And Susan, she leaned hard into the victim role. I can't believe you'd do this to Chloe. She didn't deserve it. I ignored every single one of them. By mid-afternoon, I heard a knock at my door, and I already knew who it was. I've been bracing for it all day. That didn't make it any easier. When I opened the door, Chloe stood there looking wrecked. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face blotchy from crying. She was still wearing the same dress from the night before, like she'd gone straight home and cried herself to sleep in it. Ethan, she said softly, her voice trembling, can we please talk? I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. What's left to talk about, Chloe? I was pretty clear last night. She flinched, like my words physically hit her, but she didn't back down. I know you're angry, she said, and you have every right to be, but we can fix this. We can work through it. I shook my head. You still don't get it, do you? This isn't something we just work through. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, her voice cracking as she said, I was scared. Okay? I didn't know what to do. Scared of what? I asked, my frustration bubbling up again. Scared of upsetting your parents? Scared of causing a scene? She didn't say a word. She just stood there crying, while I waited, hoping she'd say something, anything that would show me she really understood what she'd done. But nothing came. Her eyes widened and she stepped closer. Please, Ethan, she whispered. Don't do this. We can make it work. I'll talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. Just don't end it like this. I shook my head slowly. It's not just about your parents, Chloe. It's about you. Last night showed me exactly who you are, and I can't unsee that. I deserve better than this. She stood there for a moment, staring at me as her face crumpled under the weight of what I'd just said, the reality of it finally sinking in. A few weeks later, on a quiet Friday afternoon, I was cleaning out this old keepsake box of my mom's. It was something I'd kept ever since she passed. A small wooden box filled with pieces of her life. There was her favorite necklace, a pair of earrings she used to wear every Sunday to church, and a delicate little locket with a photo of my grandmother tucked inside. That locket had been passed down for generations, mother to daughter. My mom had given it to me before she died. I still remembered her words. One day, you'll know who the right person is to give this to. I kept it safe in that box ever since. It wasn't just jewelry. It was part of her, part of our family's story. But when I opened the box that day, the locket was gone. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced it. I tore through the box, carefully checking every corner. Then I searched the drawers, the shelves around it, even the floor. Nothing. And that sinking feeling in my chest grew heavier with every passing second. Someone had taken it. The only person who'd been in my apartment recently, besides family and a couple of close friends, was Chloe. And then I remembered. A few days after the breakup, she'd stopped by to return the engagement ring. Before she left, she asked if she could use the bathroom. I didn't think twice about it at the time, but now it all added up. I grabbed my phone and shot her a text. "Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box?" A few minutes later, she responded, "What are you talking about? I didn't buy that for a second." "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied. "The locket my mom gave me. It's gone. You're the only one who's been in my apartment recently. Did you take it?" She didn't reply right away, but when her message finally came through, it made my blood boil. "I borrowed it," she wrote. "I just wanted to keep a piece of her with me. I thought it might help me feel closer to you." Borrowed? Without asking? Without even mentioning it? I couldn't believe the audacity. I called her right then and there. When she picked up, she sounded defensive, like she was the one who'd been wronged. "Ethan, it's not a big deal," she said casually. "I was going to give it back." "Not a big deal?" I snapped. "That locket's been in my family for generations. It's not just some accessory you can grab whenever you feel sentimental. How could you possibly think that was okay?" "I just wanted to feel connected to you," she said, her voice trembling like she wanted me to feel sorry for her. "I didn't think you'd notice." "Of course I'd notice," I shouted. "It was my mom's. And the fact that you didn't even think to ask first makes it 10 times worse." She started crying at that point, but I wasn't in the mood for tears. "Where is it?" I demanded. Between sobs, she said, "It's at my parents' house. I didn't want to lose it, so I left it there for safekeeping. That was it. That was the last straw. You took something that didn't belong to you, something that means more to me than you'll ever understand, and just left it at your parents' house? Are you kidding me?" "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice cold. "I'm coming to get it. Now." 2 hours later, I pulled into Frank and Susan's driveway. The anger had only been building during the drive, and by the time I knocked on the door, I was on the verge of exploding. Susan opened it, her usual fake sweet smile vanishing the second she saw my face. "Ethan," she said cautiously. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to get my mom's locket," I said flatly. "Chloe told me it's here?" Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. "Chloe took a locket? Why would she?" "Just get it," I cut her off. She narrowed her eyes but stepped aside and let me in. A few minutes later, Chloe came down the stairs holding the locket in her hand. Her eyes were swollen and her face blotchy, but I didn't care. All I saw was my mother's locket dangling from her fingers like it was nothing more than costume jewelry. "Here," she said softly, holding it out to me. I snatched it from her hand and turned it over in my palm, checking every detail to make sure it was the one. When I was sure, I slipped it into my pocket and turned to leave. "Oh, Ethan, wait," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean to upset you. I was just trying to." "Save it," I said, cutting her off. "You stole from me, Chloe. From my mom." As if everything you'd already done wasn't enough. Her face collapsed and she started crying again, but I didn't look back. I walked out and slammed the door behind me. In the days that followed, I blocked her number, deleted her messages, and shut down every way she had to reach me. I was done, with her family, and with all the chaos they brought into my life. Calling off the wedding had been one of the hardest decisions I'd ever made. But this final betrayal was the nail in the coffin. And as exhausting as it was, it also brought something I hadn't felt in a long time: closure. I had stood up for myself, for my mom, and for the values she raised me with. And in that moment, I knew I'd made the right call. For the first time in a long time. I felt at peace,